And then shortly after that, my other sister, Carol, develops a cancer called cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. Her type was called mycosis fungoides. Fungoides because mushrooms. And it's an exogenous cancer that manifests on the skin outward. The tumors are on the skin. It's of biblical proportions what it does to the human body and the human soul. So she was dying, but this took a long time. And I'm talking, so 20 years of my life were basically filled with cancer, one long string of cancer. When Carol was at the end, I remember I had a restaurant in Syosset called Ron and Lou's Cafe, and we were going out of business. It was a hellhole. I was living on vodka and Marlboros at that time. And Carol asked me, I went over on break, during break she lived close by. And again, she was toward the end at this point. Her suffering was so severe and unremitting that she asked me to kill her. She asked me to help her kill herself. So I go back to the restaurant and forget this pounding sense of guilt that I'm still alive and these people have died and the suffering she's going through. I walk up to the bar and this big Irishman's there. I'm Steve McQuaid, 6'4" with a handlebar mustache. And I went to my bartender like this, and you knew what that meant. And she took a pint glass, put some ice in it, vodka like this, little grapefruit juice. I went, and this guy, Steve McQuaid, went, and he could drink. And I went again, she did it again. So just to self-medicate from this. So then, several years later, I end up back in cancer, in the cancer industry. First as an editor, a managing editor, then as a freelance writer, which I've done for 35 years, along with research. So I'm still in cancer. And then something interesting happened. I was reading an article about a clinical trial by this guy named Dr. Muni. And in it, he was a head and neck cancer specialist, but he was doing research, a clinical trial on cutaneous squamous cell carcinomas. Okay, so one of the three major skin cancers. And what he was doing, he was taking high concentrate hydrogen peroxide, which is not like in the house, it's food grade, and it's between 33 and 35%. And he was rubbing it with a Q-tip, on these lesions. And he was doing that for one reason, just to reduce the surgical margins, okay, for cosmetic reasons. Because everybody knows that H2O, hydrogen peroxide, has cytotoxic properties. It kills cells. He was flabbergasted at the end because I was talking to him and he said, Ron, 70% of these cancers with one application vanished. And then he went back a month later for rebiopsy, all the cancer cells are gone. Wow, this is very interesting. So I kept this in my head and I'm doing my own research. And I went to the dentist and my guy Larry Schwartz, and he sees in my tongue, he says, Ron, you got a spot in your tongue, I don't like the way it looks. Put it off, I went up to Maine with my wife, and I'm brushing my teeth, I said, wow, this thing had grown, and it was ugly, and it looked like a squamous cell carcinoma. Now, if there's one you don't want to get any cancer, but if there's one cancer I do not want to get, it's head and neck oral cancer, because the treatments are worse than the cancer itself. They'll do, like, for instance, a partial or total glossectomy, take out your tongue or half part of your tongue, a mandilectomy where they cut out part of your jaw. It's horrific, and you don't survive. Anyway, I'm looking at this. My wife is freaking out. So I get back home, and she goes, you got to go see Larry. You got to go see Larry, the dentist. And it's growing exponentially. And because I know about cancer, I know that this is dysregulated cellular growth. There's something really wrong, and it looked ugly. I go to Larry and Dr. Schwartz, and he says, Ron, you've got to go see a person right away. I'm really concerned about this. He goes, I'm going to send you to this oral surgeon, but he's also an MD. He's the best. He's a medical doctor on top because I'm very concerned about this. I said, okay. So I got some high concentrate hydrogen peroxide, 35% hydrogen peroxide. The appointment was about in a week. So I start rubbing it, blanching it until it blanched. Did that twice a day, 3 days, and I'm also making a solution with a little bit of the hydrogen peroxide in it and gargling. So I went to the oral surgeon about 8 days later, and I'll never forget, I sit in the chair and comes over very serious, and he's got his tools all there, the nurse put there. He's going to do the resection. He's got his scalpels and all this, and the lesion, my tongue, is up on this screen, okay? It's ugly lesion. I'm looking, And he looks at it, he goes, yeah, we got to really take care of this. Open your mouth, please. I open my mouth, and he goes like that. He looks back at the screen, and he looks at my mouth. He says, who are you? I said, I'm Ron Piana. He said, well, where is it? It disappeared. So I told him what I did, but his eyes glazed over, okay? Just didn't want to hear it. That's what I call the look when you explain something like this that's out of their comfort zone. The thing was, you've got to come back. You've got to come back in a month, because went back in a month, nothing. It had cured this lesion on the tongue, which was a suspect of a squamous cell carcinoma. So I start doing a lot of research with this. Now I say, wow, something's really going on here. And I realize that it goes back many, many years, okay? This is not a newsflash, okay? Hydrogen peroxide is a reactive oxygen species, and it kills cells. So anyway, I'm doing research on this, and I find a person that has a lesion on, and I brush it like this 2 or 3 times, it disappears. A friend of mine, an associate of mine, Bert Borsman, who is a doctor, and he's a retired surgeon, a big-time surgeon. He worked with the NCI and so forth, published 1 million papers. He's an outdoorsman. So he had 4 lesions on him, 2 on his face and 2 on his legs. And he went to the doctor. They were medically diagnosed as squamous cell carcinomas. So Bert, instead of going, he's a doctor, instead of going through the Mohs surgery, all of the standard of care, he does what he calls the Piana protocol. So he gets the high concentrate hydrogen peroxide, it's a Q-tip, rubs it until it blanches, does that 3 times, all 4 of these things are gone. Went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, what the hell happened, Bert? And he said, well, use the Piana protocol, this hydrogen and Bert said his eyes glazed over because it's out of his comfort. They don't want to know this. First of all, skin cancer, dermatology is a $1 billion industry in this country. So put that in your thought process. So this goes on, and I wrote a paper for this guy, Dr. George Lundberg, who, Dr. Lundberg was the longest running medical editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. Big time doctor, and he's a supporter of me. And I wrote a piece about what I did with my tongue and Bert Borsman and so forth. And it got a little bit of notice. He's not well known. I mean, his blog isn't well known. But I would get people that would email me, and I would explain the protocol, say I'm not a doctor, and explain the protocol to them. And lo and behold, I'd get these emails back. Ron, thank you so much. It worked. It changed my life. I didn't have to go to the doctor. This medically diagnosed squamous cell carcinoma, it's cured. So I'm going on and on, and there's something here that's, okay, because in cancer you rarely, if ever, use the word cure. But this was curing squamous cell carcinomas. Now, between basal and squamous cell carcinomas, it kills about 420,000 people a year. Squamous cells alone kill 15,000 Americans, okay? So I'm continuing to do this research, and I get to the point where I'm getting some pushback from people. But let me tell you how this works. And it's a biochemically complex process, but it's really not. So if you're looking to defeat something, you look for its weaknesses, right? I did a little amateur boxing when I was a young guy at a Gleason's gym over here on 33rd Street, no longer there. So in boxing, like anything, any sport, you look for a weakness. So if a guy's throwing a left jab and he drops his right hand, he's open for a left hook. Always look for weaknesses in something you want to defeat. So I was doing research and continuing, and lo and behold, the cancer cells, first of all, 90% of all cancers are carcinomas. Right? Carcinomas arise in the epithelial tissue that line the organs and the skin, 90% of them. And almost 90%, the vast, vast majority of carcinomas have 2 deficiencies, 2 weaknesses. Number 1, they don't produce enough of an enzyme called catalase. Catalase's main job in the body, in the cell, is to neutralize hydrogen peroxide. That's what it does. Okay? The other weakness is because of their hyperreplication that cancer cells have, the dysregulation, they need more iron than normal cells. Okay? So they draw more iron out of the blood than a normal cell. So think about that. So they have excess iron and not enough catalase. Hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, is a small molecule, called small molecule. So it has the ability, when it encounters a carcinoma cell, it has the ability to diffuse into the cell, and it builds up because the cancer cell does not have enough catalase to break it down into harmless oxygen and water, okay? So it's building up. And then the other thing is, because of the excess iron, it initiates what's called the Fenton reaction. The Fenton reaction produces a thing called the hydroxyl radical. Hydroxyl radicals kill the cell. It's called liquid peroxidase. And what that does is it breaks down the bilipid cell membrane and kills this cancer cell. This happens every single time. It's an irrefutable process that always happens when H2O2 encounters carcinomas. It kills them, okay? So here we have a situation that this is known, okay, but it's not being prosecuted. It's not being properly looked at. Well, for one, because of the huge financial situation involved. I'll give you an example of how compartmentalized and protective these people are. So,
imagine that.